foremost name among Vedic Rishikas is that of Gargi. Now, Gargi, we know that today she's been honored with colleges and institutes of higher learning named after her. But she can be called the foremost among, Indic feminists of the time. I would say spiritual women of the time. She is one of the most revered Rishikas of ancient India. And her contribution to both womankind as well as spirituality is really timeless. I think Gargi remains the first and foremost icon of feminism and the mother of all feminists, we could say. And although she lived at a time when the concept of feminism did not exist, she defied gender roles to prove that a woman can live an independent life without being subordinated to man. And she was also a champion of women's education and is said to have made rich contributions to propagate it. So she is an ideal role model for young girls on the threshold of beginning their careers. Following her example, they can inculcate her spirit of learning to further their goals. And by unleashing the Gargi within them, they can achieve freedom through education. So that is the legacy of Gargi. Unlike Gargi, who debated in public, and Maitreyi represents the path of contemplation, really. And she proved that women are not just companions to their spouses; they are also seekers and partners in the pursuit of the highest truth. So that is Maitreyi, and she's also another Upanishadic heroine, another icon of feminine spirituality, and she's an enduring figure, I would say. And she was bold and fearless and so one-pointed and focused in her pursuit, that nothing could stop.
Namaste, ladies and gentlemen. I am Ujasvi Mishra, welcoming you to another episode of our series Sitaism, Women Who Carve Our History and Society from Exemplars of Feminine Infinitude who are indispensable in the making and running of a civilization as ancient as ours. Today, we will discuss 5 historical personalities, some obscure, others not so obscure, namely Vedic Rishikas like Gargi, Maitreyi, Lopamudra, Varkari, Saint Bahinabai, and Saadhvi Kamlesh Kumari. Our speaker today is Nandini Kapadia ji, author of India's Spiritual Heroines, who shall explore feminine spirituality through devotion, mysticism, spiritual knowledge, and lived experience. Her work bridges ancient wisdom and modern insight, honoring women who embody spiritual excellence and transcendence. I welcome you, ma'am, and I hand over the reins to you.
Thank you, Jasvi. Thank you for having me. Namaste. So today, as Jasvi said, I'll be discussing these Vedic Rishikas with you. And so let me start with saying that like in the Rigvedic times, like around 700 BC, there were many Rishikas who came into prominence. And some of them are well known, some of them are not well known, some of them are abstractions as well. So one name I wanted to mention, which is not very well known, is that of Ghosha. Now, Ghosha was she was the daughter of, and in the course of my talks, I will be reading from my book as well as I've taken some notes, so I'll be using those as well. So I wanted to start with this Vedic Rishika called Ghosha. She's not very well known, but she was the daughter of Rishi Kakshivan, and who was a descendant of sage Angiras, a well-known philosopher of the time. So she suffered from a skin ailment, which later on, I think in later retelling, they said it might have been leprosy. So her from childhood, and she continuously used to keep praying to the Ashwin twins, who are the physicians of they were divine physician twins. So she used to write hymns to them, and she used to pray to them to cure her of her illness. So pleased with her sincerity and devotion, they did cure her of her disease and restored her youthfulness, and also bestowed on her the Madhu Vidya, or honey knowledge, the profound doctrine of the self. And subsequently, she was able to enjoy, and she always prayed to them also that she would be blessed with a suitable match, which also happened, and she managed to live a very fulfilled life. So that was the story of Ghosha. And now, of course, the foremost name among Vedic Rishikas is that of Gargi. Now, Gargi, we know that today she's been honored with colleges and institutes of higher learning named after her. But she can be called the foremost among, Indic feminists of the time, I would say spiritual women of the time. She is one of the most revered Rishikas of ancient India. And her contribution to both womankind as well as spirituality is really timeless. And so she lived around 700 BC, as I said earlier, and during Rig Vedic times, and she also authored hymns in the Rig Veda. And she was the daughter of a sage named Vachaknu. That's why her name is Gargi Vachaknavi. And in those days, mainly the philosophical debates and discourses and metaphysical discourses, they were all pretty much male dominated. But yet she rose to fame because of her, she rose as a respected Brahmavadini who was trained in Vedic lore and metaphysical thought. And she used to be invited to public debates and discourses because she had a real intellectual bent of mind, and she could expound the Vedas brilliantly. So she was also called Brahmavadini because she was the expounder of Vedas and she had very deep knowledge on the subject. So the main story, her legacy basically comes to us from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where she debates a very renowned sage of her time whose name was Yajnavalkya. And so this is this debate is one of the earliest recorded philosophical debates in human history. And she questioned one of the greatest sages of her time with great intellectual clarity and poise. And she posed questions about the origin of the universe. So let me read from my book about how she questions him. She says, Yajnavalkya, that which, so this is again, they are continuing on the origin of the universe. So her question is, Yajnavalkya, that which they say is above heaven and below the earth, which is between heaven and earth as well, and which was, is, and shall be. Tell me, in what is it woven, warp and woof? So Yajnavalkya said, that, O Gargi, is ether. Ether or akasha is the subtlest element, so subtle that it is often indistinguishable from consciousness. Without it, nothing can exist, yet there is more. And so he goes on and he keeps on expounding the doctrine of the Brahman, or of Brahman, the highest truth, or Akshara Brahman, whatever. So that shows that she was of a very high intellectual caliber, basically. So her legacy is very timeless for us, and she contributed equally to womankind as well as spirituality. So she is one of the first Indic icon of feminine spirituality, you could say. So, and her life kind of models a spiritually rooted feminism, I would say, where self-realization is the highest form of empowerment. And she offers a very feminine wisdom that is grounded and deeply spiritual. And so her conduct teaches women and seekers that everything that seekers everywhere, that spiritual authority does not depend on status, gender, or age. So, and that women are equally capable of understanding the highest truth. So that is the legacy of Gargi. So that is one of the, as I said, one of the main Rishikas of the Vedic time. So, and she, in the annals of history, I think Gargi remains the first and foremost icon of feminism and the mother of all feminists, we could say. Then, although she lived at a time when the concept of feminism did not exist, she defied gender roles to prove that a woman can live an independent life without being subordinated to man. you know. And she was also a champion of women's education and is said to have made rich contributions to propagate it. So she is an ideal role model for young girls on the threshold of beginning their careers. Following her example, they can inculcate her spirit of learning to further their goals. And by unleashing the Gargi within them, they can achieve freedom through education. So that is the legacy of Gargi, I would say. Now, there was another Rishika in that same time period, and whose name was Maitreyi. Now, Maitreyi was also she also appears in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and she was not like a public, as much of a public figure as Gargi, but she also made a very enduring contribution towards, again, womankind and spirituality. Now, I believe that Gargi and Maitreyi were related. I think Gargi was around. So Maitreyi also had a thirst for learning right from spiritual knowledge, right from the childhood. And her father, knowing her, he was also a respected rishi. And knowing of her tendency, he imparted all the knowledge he had with him. And then she wanted more and more. And then the only person who could do that was again Sage Yagyavalakya. So what happened was that in those days, women generally were not accepted as disciples to these sages, and they were also married at that time, the sages. So in this case also, the dilemma was that if she had to learn under Yagyavalakya, how would she do it, since he was already married, and he would not generally encourage, I mean, not have any other women disciple there. So they Gargi devised a plan, and she approached Yagyavalakya's first wife, who's she was a very noble woman, and she asked her if it would be okay if Maitreyi married Yagyavalakya to become his disciple, not that she would take Katyayani's place. And that noble woman agreed, and so Maitreyi married Yagyavalakya and continued her studies under him. Now, after many years, it so happened that Yagyavalakya decided that it was time for him to retire and go into the forest to give up his grihastha life. So he called both his wives and said that this was his decision. And the first wife was very contented with her share, but Maitreyi was not, So she asked him this question: if this entire earth filled with wealth were mine, would I become immortal through that? So he replies, no, like the life of the wealthy, so would your life be. There is no hope for immortality through wealth. So then thus begins a dialogue, which is one of the most celebrated passages of all time again. And because of her intellectual maturity, the question she asks, she draws out from Yagyavalakya the timeless teachings on the nature of the self. So that is what we have today because of her, And so she possessed both, really. She possessed Viveka and Vairagya both, So she had the discernment as well as the detachment. She didn't crave for worldly comfort. And so in that, unlike Gargi, who debated in public, and Maitreyi represents the path of contemplation, really, and she proved that women are not just companions to their spouses, they are also seekers and partners in the pursuit of the highest truth. So that is Maitreyi, and she's also another Upanishadic heroine, another icon of feminine spirituality, and she's an enduring figure, I would say. And she was bold and fearless, and so one-pointed and focused in her pursuit, that nothing could stop her, really. So that is the story of Maitreyi. And then again, we come to the third Vedic Rishika, whose name was Lopamudra. Now, Lopamudra was the spouse of a very eminent sage called Sage Agastya. And, and she appears again in Rigveda, as well as she also appears in Mahabharata much later in the Vana Parva. So she also is in many ways an early torchbearer of the Indic feminine spirituality. So she was. She is also a mantra drishta and a Vedic Rishika, who her verses, they stand out for their emotional clarity of expression. And that verse which is written in the Rig Veda is often interpreted as a dialogue with her husband Agastya. Now, in that, she very elegantly urges him to not neglect his domestic life, and basically her as well, and his responsibilities towards his wife, while he's pursuing, spiritual knowledge and spiritual truth. So she puts it in a very, I found it very elegant. She says, that which lies hidden in the heart of woman, like the secret knowledge of the seer, let a wise man inquire into it with love, not austerity. So she gently tries to tell him that, austerity need not, that does not mean that you ignore one part of your life. So she says, so that makes her one of the first women in spiritual literature to integrate sensuality with spirituality, basically. She challenges the notion that spiritual life must be devoid of intimacy or emotion. So her idea is very revolutionary. She essentially argues for a holistic spirituality without losing sight of higher pursuit. And so, in that sense, she represents a spirituality that is whole, feminine, and deeply rooted in both transcendent truth. So in celebrating Lopamudra, we also celebrate a lineage where women were originators and creators of sacred knowledge, and who walked the path alongside their spouses, however eminent they were. So I wanted to also read out other her legacy, because she also was a mantra drishta. So she was a. I'm going to read out to you from my book. So, and as I said, she also appears in Mahabharata. And there she is portrayed as Agastya's perfect woman, because it was he who created her. And then he gave that little, so he created her from various parts of animals and birds and nature and all that. So that's why they call Lopa means loss. And Mudra means the features that so he made a perfect woman, and then he gave that little baby to a king to raise her, and then he said, I'll come back for her when she's of marriageable age, and then I'll marry her. So that is in Lopamudra. And so that she was his perfect woman, kind of. And in and even though she was born and brought up in a palace, she gave up everything, and she married Agastya, because her thirst for knowledge, spiritual knowledge, was very high. And mantra drishta, one who meditated and derived the true meaning of a mantra. She is the revealer of the Hadi Panchadashi mantra of the Shakta tradition of Hinduism. It is one of the most esoteric mantras dedicated to goddess Lalita Mahatripura Sundari. And they were both also the husband and wife, Lopamudra and Agastya. They were renowned for disseminating the greatness of Lalita Sahasranam also, that is the 1,000 names of the Divine Mother. And so that is Lopamudra's legacy. She was, you can call her, she had equal measure of beauty and brains. And in Indian scriptures also, she's been extolled as one of the most beautiful and clever women of her time. So that is the third Vedic heroine, Lopamudra. Now we come to 17th century, where in Maharashtra there were a lot of Varkari saints. Now Varkari is an offshoot of Hinduism, and they worship Lord Vithoba, and they have their own, tenets on how to worship the Lord, and they do it in a household setting, and not really, and they do their yearly pilgrimages to the Vithala temple in Pandharpur. So, in this Varkari tradition, we must have heard names of Sant Tukaram and Sant Gyaneshwar and all, but there were also many women saints there. They are called Sant So there was, of course, Sant Gyaneshwar's sister was Muktabai. She was also a very famous Varkari saint. There was Janabai, there was Sakubai, there was Kanopatra, and there was another woman saint called Bahinabai. Now, Bahinabai was a prolific poet also, and she had this right from the word go. She had. Always she was torn between devotion to God and to Vithala and duty towards her husband. And how she manages to reconcile both. And she had a very tough marriage. And her own poem says that. See, she wrote about 400 to 500 verses in her lifetime, which are still, and they're still sung in Varkari pilgrimages. But her early life, what she recounts in her verses called Atma Nivedan, where she's recounted the struggles she had to face in early in her life. She was born in a small, village called Devgaon, and she was married off at the age of 5. Imagine that. And she was married to a widower. His name was Gangadhar, who was about 25 years her senior. And this man, though she says he was of noble character, but he had a very volatile temper. So the story goes in her own words. She's recounting all this in that Atma Nivedan. She writes very beautifully. She's simple words, full of humility and very raw emotions, kind of, It's very nice. So I wanted to read out to you. So in that Atma Nivedan, she talks about her trials and tribulations with her troubled marriage. So her abhangas reveal to us that her troubled marriage and regret at being born a woman affected her the most. She was always torn between wifely duties and devotion, and she narrates how she brought about a reconciliation between the two. you know she never went became a rebel or left a marriage or anything, but how she turned her suffering into insights, basically. So that is her story. And in that there is one very touching story of her her calf. She had a cow and a calf, and she's recounted that story, which I'm going to read out to you. And it's a very beautiful and touching story, and how it changed gave her kind of a new direction in life. So the story goes that I'm going to read out to you. So the story goes that they were traveling and they were in Kolhapur at one time. The whole family, the husband, wife, and Bahinabai's parents also, they were with her. The story goes that Bahiram Bhatt was one Brahmin, gifted Gangadhar, that is Bahinabai's husband, a black cow and his newborn calf on a festive occasion. With utmost joy, Bahini and her parents began to look after them. The calf soon formed an extraordinary attachment to Bahini. It went with her everywhere, just like the little lamb that followed Mary in the much loved nursery rhyme. Without her, it seemed unhappy. Then she says in her own words, and I quote, "Only when I gave it grass would it eat, only when I gave it water would it drink. At night it slept on my bedding. As it listened to the reading of the Purana, it would sob with emotion." So in this way, there is a very close bond which developed between the calf and Bahina. So at one time, there was a Kathakar, some famous Kathakar at that time. He used to expound Bhagavad Purana and all. He came to Kolhapur, and Bahina and the calf would follow her, of course. So they would go and listen to her, to this Gosavi every day. So one day, what happened was that when she goes to listen, a large crowd of bhaktas had gathered to participate on that fateful day. Bahini, her mother, father, and brother were also present with the calf beside her. And there were a multitude of devotees who sat in special seats in the middle, and the chanting began with great rejoicing, accompanied by cymbals and drums. So so what happened was that suddenly the somebody noticed the calf, and somebody pointed it out to the Gosavi, and he took notice of them. So after that, the satsang was over, he went over and he patted the calf and he blessed Bahinabai on her, on her head. And so her husband came to know about this the next day. And one woman described to him what had transpired, including how the Gosavi had graciously blessed Bahinabai. So his face flushed with anger and he ran to the house. In a blinding rage, he seized Bahini by the braids and beat her violently. Like a fire out of control, he could not restrain himself from thrashing her to his heart's content. To her parents' horror, he tied her hands and feet and hurled her like a bundle into a corner. And so this is how she was treated basically. And Bahina Bai says in her poetry, "My body accepted it. Who can ward off the force of fate?" And so what happened was, it was so torturous to watch that even the cow and the calf were like, they moaned aloud in distress, and they would not eat or drink anything. And so when Gangadhar, her husband, saw this, he untied her, but they refused to eat, and the calf died basically. So that Bahina Bai, when she went to the funeral of that calf, she fainted over there. She could not bear it. And it seems that and she was in a coma for 4 days. And so after that, that was like the turning point in her life. She says that in her unconscious state, she experienced enlightenment and saw Lord Vithala before her. A few days later, Sant Tukaram came into her dream and initiated her into the Ramakrishna Hari Mantra. So basically, that was the turning point in Bahina Bai's life. And her legacy was that despite going through so much torture and trouble in a marriage, she overcame them. She transcended them, and she was able to grow spiritually through them. So her poetry reflects her intense inner life lived within the constraint of her very patriarchal marriage, basically. She speaks of the pain from being torn between her devotion to Sant Tukaram, her guru, and her duty towards her husband, which that is a dilemma familiar to women across many cultures. Um, Yet she does not rebel outwardly. She transforms suffering into insight. She reclaims the inner world of her as her sacred space and offers a model of inner resistance, a model of inner resistance and inner transcendence. You see? And despite being discouraged, even punished with severe beatings, she chose her own guru. She still did it. She doggedly pursued the path of Nam Dharma. In doing so, she subtly subverted the social order while maintaining the outer role of a dutiful wife. You know, so her contribution is that the devotion in the face of personal and social adversity and reinterpretation of domestic struggles, uh, as per reinterpretation of domestic struggles and spiritual practice, and uniquely feminine voice that is continues to inspire the bhakti movement in Maharashtra and elsewhere. And she is a very bold example of inner strength, humility, and devotion in a deeply unequal world, basically. And as her story goes, we learn that later on, the husband does mend his ways, and he also accepts Tukaram as his guru, although initially he was severely opposed to it, and he was even going to leave her at one point. So that is her triumph in the end, that through her devotion and through her these uh, problems in her life, she was able to transcend them and empower herself spiritually. So that is the story of Bahina Bai. And lastly, I would like to talk about a very special Saadhvi Yogini, or whatever her. She is not at all well known like others, and she is of the modern day age of 20th century. And she's also special to me because she was my mother's guru. Okay, so her name is Saadhvi Kamlesh Kumari Didi, and lovingly her followers address her. Of course, she's no more now in the flesh, but she used to be addressed as Didi Maa, or Ma Karunamai, or we used to just call. I have seen her as a child. I used to call her Didi. So she was belonged to the Nath tradition. The Nath tradition is like supposedly started by Guru Gorakhnath. So they are all Shaivite Bhakta, I mean the followers of Shaivism. And her guru was Swami Madhvanand, Didi Maa's guru. So Didi Maa's guru was Swami Madhvanand, who was trained under Yogi Surendranath, who was a great yogi, master yogi, and the Surendranath Maharaj used to meditate in a cave in the Himalayas, very close to the Badrinath temple. And even today there is a shrine there in his memory. And he's always shown. I wish I had a photo to show you. But I can show you the photo of Didi Maa. She initially came from Punjab, from Pakistan, her family, and she belonged to the Sindhi community. One sec, let me find her photo. Yeah, this is the photo of Didi Maa. Can you see it? Yeah. So this is the photo of Didi Maa. And so she was like an embodiment of Shakti. And she was a very charismatic woman. And she did her master in English literature. And she was also a professor in Bombay. And she had no intention of joining any spiritual thing. But apparently her sisters were... they used to follow Swami Madhvanand, and one day she went to meet him, and apparently she just doesn't remember what happened. From that day, she could not bear to be parted from him. So she became his disciple, and she renounced everything, and then he took her kind of under his wings. So back to Surendranath Maharaj, he was a great yogi, and there are many stories that he's always shown perpetually immersed in meditation. In fact, if I have a photograph of him later on, I will send it to you. And there is also one legend that they used to have we have these Prayagraj mein there are these fairs for Siddhas, no? Sorry. Excuse me, yeah. So there is a story that once he was immersed in real meditation, and then some boys, they wanted to play a prank on him. So they went into his hut where he was, and they placed a piece of burning charcoal on his thigh. And it seems that he did not open his eyes. He was deeply immersed in meditation. And when he came to, he saw that that piece of charcoal had completely gone inside his body, but he didn't feel anything. And later on, when these boys realized that what a great yogi he was, they came and fell at his feet, and he forgave them. So that was the Sundarnathji Maharaj, and Sundarnathji Maharaj also traveled south, and there is a big shrine to him even in a place called Kadri Math near in Udupi, which I have been to recently. And so his disciple was Swami Madhvanand, and he trained under him for 12 years in the Himalayan region. And then he, at his master's command, he came bound to the plains, and he started preaching the secrets of the, yogic asanas and yogic kriyas. So it is said that when Didi Maa met him, he was already 100 years old. And then he had a lot of siddhis, and he was also a Rajguru of like 56 principalities in those days. So slowly, Didi Maa learned under him, and then she, after his samadhi and all, she started preaching his whatever she had been taught. And that is when one of the time my mother met her in Mumbai, and that's when my mother claims that she started crying in front of her, and from that day her life also changed. But one story I want to tell about Didi Maa is that she, as I said, she could not be she could not think of herself being parted from her guru. She was so attached to him. So it seemed that when he was taking his samadhi, he took actually Jal Samadhi in Gujarat in one of the Tapi River. So she was so, and they were all the followers that gathered on the banks of the river, and they were watching him. And she was so overcome with grief that she could not bear it, and she too jumped into the river, although she didn't know how to swim. So it seemed that apparent later on she said that she got a push back from the waters, deep waters, and then she came back to, and she was saved that way. So that was, I found very, I've never heard of anybody doing that. I mean, I keep hearing that we tell stories about how we can do so much for our guru, we'll do so much. But this is the first instance I know firsthand that somebody actually loved their guru so much that they jumped into the water without thinking about their own safety. So she is also, the Didi Maa is an also very important cog in the wheel of this Guru Shishya Parampara. And there are countless other such women saints whom we hardly hear about, but they are all kind of lead simple, austere lives, and they shun name, fame, ostentation, anything. And I would say they are the real McCoys, who inspire us to follow the path of truth through their writings, their talks, and their leading an exemplary life. So that is Didi Maa's legacy, I would say. She was a embodiment of Mahashakti, and she is revered today by her followers. And there is ashram in Rajasthan in their lineage, who is run by her successor. So these are the five women saints we have covered today, and I hope their lives are inspiring, and they are like role models of Indic feminine spirituality. And this is my book. As I said, this is Spiritual Heroines. And I think for youngsters, such a book would be a great addition to their curriculum, I would say, because it gives them a very, of course, it's a very high level view of all these women saints, but it gives them a good starting point, and it would be a good addition to the curriculum, I would say. So, Jasvi, thank you for having me, and God bless. Namaste.
Thank you very much for your time, ma'am. This was extremely enriching and a very wonderful addition as an episode to the Sitaism initiative. Thank you once again for gracing our platform. We wish to have many such with you. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.